Hello, here we are with the AQA Specimen Material 1. We're looking at GCSE English Language 8700, and the paper we're looking at is Paper 2, Writers, Viewpoints and Perspectives. So hopefully you found the right paper, and we're going to look at question 3. The first thing to notice about question 3 is that it'll always be on one source and only one source. And that's quite important. You'll see why that is when I show you question 2, which is about source A and source B. So what that tells you in terms of exam technique is that you shouldn't do question 2 first, because that makes it more difficult. You need to read two sources for that. Instead, you need to be familiar with source B before you can answer question 2, where you write about the differences. Therefore, do question 3 before question 2, and I hope you can see why. And a second reason why is question 2 only counts for 8 marks. However, back at question 3, it counts for 12 marks. In other words, you're going to start getting marks quicker in the exam if you do question 3 before question 2. Okay, so what are the demands? Well, remember to find the right source, so you're only going to do the source that's named. It will probably always be source B, and then you have to look at the command words. This will always be a language question, and because it's always a language question, I hope you realize that means you must always quote. Every time you make a point, no matter what it is, you must quote. If you don't quote, you can't get the top marks. Okay, so I know I must quote. What must I do to choose my quotations? Well, the other keyword is influence, so I've got to find quotations that will help Henry influence his father, or, in a more sophisticated answer, Henry thinks will influence his father, but you might decide that his father will see through this. That's up to you. But highlighting the keywords in this way means that I always answer exactly what the question says. Now, pupils often ask a logical question, but the wrong question, and I'll show you why it's both logical and wrong. The question is, how much should I write, sir? Well, there are two answers. The first is that the examiners give you the space to write. So if I scroll through, that's the end of the first page, then you get a second page, and boom, then you run out of room. So actually, you're not going to write a massive amount. And you also have 12 minutes in which to write. Well, how long should you spend writing? The total time for the exam is 1 hour and 45 minutes. And the examiners give you some very stupid advice. They say, spend 15 minutes reading. Now, the reason that's stupid advice is that you won't earn a single mark while you're reading. Another reason is working memory, that's your ability to remember stuff, is actually quite tiny. If I gave you a telephone number to remember, once it got beyond 6 numbers, you'd really struggle to remember that information. You know, try it for yourself. So thinking, oh, I'll read this paper and then I'll remember what's in it and I'll understand it better, is actually a false position. It's not the case. That's just the science of the way the brain works. So do not spend 15 minutes reading. You want to start writing straight away. Well, if you do start writing straight away, that means you've got a lot more time to earn your marks. So section B is a writing question, which you probably know. It'll probably be a persuasive bit of writing, and you can safely answer that in 45 minutes. Which leaves you 1 hour to do section A, and that's 40 marks as well. So 60 minutes, 40 marks, you probably worked out that means 1.5 minutes per mark. And here you have 12 marks, so times 1.5 is 18 minutes. And so the real answer to the question of how much should I write, sir, is you write as much as you can in 18 minutes. For some of you, that will be that much. For others, it'll be that much, and for others, it'll be, give me some more paper, please, invigilator, I've got more to say. So I will explain in later videos why you shouldn't go over that time limit, but now let's get into the question itself. So you will be given an insert with the two texts that you must read. One text, source A, will be written in the 21st century or the 20th century and will be quite accessible. However, source B will be 19th century in each exam that you do. In this instance, they're two short letters to make one whole text. So you'll need to see another video of mine to work out what the common features of 19th century texts are. But for this, let's just leap forward to source B and see what it looks like. So you will always be given a little bit of information to help you understand the context. So here we're looking at two letters, they're by a boy called Henry. You need to know what a boarding school is, I'm sure most of you will. You're told what a boarding school does and who would use it. So you're not expected to know everything. However, the more general knowledge you have, the easier this paper will be. So there you have one short letter from Henry to his father, and then another short letter. And you simply have to quote from it for 18 minutes. And each time you quote, you're going to use that keyword, influence, because you're thinking about how he will influence his father. You're even given a translation of words that might be difficult. Don't just ignore these because they're not in the box. They'll help you understand the text. Okay, now it's really important that you study the assessment objectives, which the examiners always call AOs. Now I'm finding this in the mark scheme. You can download these from the AQA website. They're very easy to understand, but not very easy to apply, and I'll show you that in a minute. The first thing that the examiners do is tell you the skills that they want to reward. So they want you to comment on and analyse language, and you can include structure. Now there's a slight problem there because the question didn't ask you to look at the structure, did it? But if you notice something about the structure of the writing, you can include that. Let's have a quick look and see if we can. Okay, if you're looking at structure, the obvious places to look are at beginnings and endings. That's when the writer thinks hardest about structure, and it's also where you can most quickly see what they're up to. So here Henry calls his father dear father, and we can see that he's using a term of endearment there, but here with father he's trying to convey his respect for his father. Let's look at the ending. Your respectful son. So here he's showing that he doesn't just love his father, he looks up to him. He's behaving in an honourable way, things that we can infer a Victorian father might appreciate. So Henry is dutifully playing his role here. So you can see how it's very easy to write about structure, even though you're not asked to in the question. And I hope you can also see that the examiners are a little bit unfair because they're going to reward you for this even though they don't ask you to do it. So unless you've watched my video, you won't write about the structure probably. Your teacher's probably not told you to write about the structure, but there it is in the mark scheme. Now, why this is really good news for you is that if you do mention something about the structure, your answer is going to be different to most other students, and the examiner won't be able to help themselves. They'll just want to give you higher marks. You will just feel more of an expert in English than other students. Other ways that they want you to appear like an expert is to use relevant subject terminology, and I'm going to recommend that you actually learn this stuff. Don't leave it to chance. Learn the right terminology and the right definitions and use them. Use them every single time you quote. So every time you mention some language, you're going to say what that technique is. Is it alliteration? Is it juxtaposition? Is it anaphora? Whatever it is, you're going to name it. I'll probably do a separate video on what the techniques are. Okay, well the next thing that the exam mark scheme does is it just asks the examiner in this column here to make a gut reaction. And so they say, well, just tell me what you think. Do you think it's detailed, perceptive and an analysis, or do you just think it's clear and relevant? And so the bad news is the examiner's going to make up their mind almost immediately after reading your first paragraph which of those two descriptions best applies. The good news is you can look at your 18 minutes worth of writing and do the same. You know, am I clear and relevant? Have I just explained stuff? Or have I gone, am I detailed? Have I written loads? Do I sound perceptive? And of course, one way that you'll sound perceptive is using the right terminology, and you will definitely sound perceptive if you're writing about structure occasionally, looking at beginnings and endings, which other candidates will not do. So I've shown you one technique to get into the level 4. The examiners also then give you the next column. Detailed, well, you're just going to write loads. Perceptive, we've covered that. You're looking at the writer's choices of language, well, you're quoting all the time. What on earth is a judicious range of textual detail? Well, textual detail means you quote. Judicious range is examiner speak for you've got a whole load of them, a range. How do I know they're judicious? Well, there's a bit of a cheating way to do this. You just use really short quotations and you stick them in your answer. They're called embedded quotations. I'll show you those in a minute. But if you use short quotations, you are being judicious. Okay, what do I do next? Well, the examiners are partly helpful here. What they do is give you a part of an answer. Now, obviously, at the top end in a level 4, you'd write a lot more than that in 18 minutes. And the examiners say this. This is only an indicative standard. In other words, it only indicates what part of an answer might look like. It's not a model answer, it's not complete, and it doesn't exemplify particular content. In other words, they're not looking for particular answers. Yeah, there aren't right and wrong answers. What they're looking at is an indication of the level of your answer, so how skilled you are. Now, to understand that better, I'm going to copy and paste this answer into Word and compare it to a level 3 answer to see exactly what the examiner has in mind. Pay attention. Well, let's first read the level 4 answer, and my hint to you here that explanations suggest alternative interpretations or more than one idea. That's what's going to get you into level 4. Let's read it, and as I read it, I'm going to ask you to see if you can spot where the alternative interpretations are or where more than one idea is offered. Henry uses direct address to his father, which suggests familiarity. You will not let. You will let me come home, and shows how his future is in the hands of his father. But this is also contrasted with a much more distant and formal mode of address, my dear father. This noun phrase is repeated in a number of places as an emotional tool to try and reinforce that his father is dear to him, though the distance and time lapse of them being together suggests to the reader this may not be so. I've highlighted different parts of the text for other reasons, but hopefully you can spot which ones of the highlights are adding alternative interpretations. So here's one. The candidates said the tone is distant, but then added another idea, formal. Here they've added one idea, an emotional tool, but then they've added a new idea to try to reinforce. Here, with the whole section in red, is an alternative interpretation. We know it's alternative because they've used this word to introduce it, though the distance and time lapse of them being together suggests to the reader that this may not be so. And again, this use of tentative language signposts to the examiner that they are offering an alternative. So it's a really useful thing to use perhaps, or may, or could as a way to show the examiner that you're offering alternative interpretations, and that fits with the exam criteria being perceptive. Okay, if we look at a level 3 answer now, which you'll see down here, you'll see how the colour coding works. So I'll just minimize the size of that so that we can compare the two bits of writing. So here we go. Henry uses direct address to his father, which suggests familiarity. Henry uses direct address to his father, which suggests familiarity. It's the same point. But in the level 3 answer, he's asking to come home. Whereas in the level 4 answer, he's asking to come home, which is his immediate future, but the examiner considers this to be a more sophisticated point, that he's putting his wider future in the hands of his father. And that's a way that he introduces more than one idea. Okay, this is also contrasted with, this is a contrast to, so it's pretty much the same. His more formal use of, you will not let, sorry, my dear father. Well, the same quotation is used here, but it's made even shorter, just focusing on the one word. And that's another way of embedding your quotation, making it fit into the sentence and zooming in on just one word instead of 3. I mean, 3 is pretty good, I have to say, but this is just another trick that you can use to show the examiner you are being judicious. In other words, choosing your quotations well. We can see the extra information about this. So it's an emotional tool. It's trying to reinforce something earlier. In this example, the student has just said, oh, sorry, here we are. That's the equivalent of an emotional tool, but it's not just to get him home here. It's to show how dear his father is to him, how much he loves his father. We'll look again at how that point is developed. You can see the emotional tool matches with the emotional appeal, but this idea of the contrast of formal tone, which is there, is developed much more fully in this bit, and it's the bit in red that's going to get you the extra marks, introducing extra interpretations. Really, there isn't that much difference, is there, between this and that, and the examiner's going to do it on a gut instinct, and it's just simply that, which I've highlighted here. Can you introduce more than one interpretation or more than one idea for each quotation? If you do that, you will get much higher marks. Even though I would argue that this student has understood the text just as well as this student. What they haven't done is that skill there. Now, what might be frustrating for you is that the exam mark scheme doesn't tell you to do that. Let's have a look. Here we go. It never tells you in this section to write about new ideas, extra ideas, or alternative interpretations. So your teacher may not teach you to do this. And of course the question doesn't ask you to do this. But when the examiner shows us their exemplar, we can see that is the main skill. If you would like to test your writing to see if you do that skill, why don't you download these papers from AQA and have a go at part of the question, post it on my channel and say, you know, have I done what you've asked me to do, Mr. Salles? Am I able to offer alternative interpretations? And I'll definitely answer at least the first couple that get sent to me. And if you don't send it to me, show it to your teacher, because you really ought to be aiming for the top marks. Because as we've seen, a candidate who can read well enough to get those marks actually has the skills to get those, and it's just about practicing them. So good luck with your revision. If you'd like to know more, just subscribe.